as small as a seed.
You have heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she's been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery.
Now, this is one of the, you have heard it said, but I tell you. All right? Statements in Matthew. Now, one of the problems with this passage is this passage was spoken by Jesus in what commentators are now starting to call, and I think it's a good phrase to call it, a high context society. Now, what do we mean by that? If you take, for example, the word family. Now, when I was a younger person, the concept of family, of mother, father, divorce, all of those sorts of things was very locked in. Divorce was much more exceptional than it is now. So what divorce means today is very different from what it meant in the 1950s when my parents split up. Jesus was not speaking in the 1950s. He was speaking here in around about the year 30. 2,000 years ago, and he's speaking to a group of people to whom divorce meant something in a particular context. Some of the commentaries I've read on this, it's been said that people were using this as a means to have affairs. So that if somebody got the hots for another woman and a woman had the hots for him, he knew that he couldn't get involved with her unless he was married to her, because that's adultery otherwise. So what he would do, he would go to his wife, say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, give her the certificate of divorce. She's now divorced. So then he marries the other woman and he can have his affair. When he's finished, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and away you go. Now, it would appear that that kind of practice was going on. And the problem was that the moment a woman was treated that way, she then was treated by the rest of society as an adulteress. What happened then was, if you were abused, you had actually been tainted and you were now second rate, you were used goods, you were of no value. When Jesus says that if you do this, if anyone divorces his wife except for sexual immorality, it causes her to become an adulteress, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery, he's basically saying, look, what you are doing is you are playing games with each other. The issue of faithfulness in your relationships is not there, and you're using these religious laws and religious disputes and religious arguments to basically manipulate and use each other on your own lusts anyway. We've got to be very careful in this passage not to legislate on divorce. Because what Jesus is really saying in this passage is, listen, stop using religious rules or arguments about religious rules to create pretexts within which you can conduct your own corruption and wickedness, but give it the appearance of righteousness. And that's very much the thrust of Jesus' teaching and very much the thrust of the Sermon on the Mount. We can't really do what has been done quite often, to use this as biblical grounds for how we legislate on the issue of divorce and remarriage. That's really an important point to take from this.
What is the nitty-gritty of what God really wants? I know it's no divorce, but we're in a fallen society, and when it does fall apart, what
how do you manage the issue of divorce?
Yes.
I'm really pleased you raised that question, because the moment you see this verse in its context, what's annoying for some people is that what we thought was a nice, tidy passage that allows us to legislate on divorce slips through our fingers because it's not what it's talking about. Right? It happens to say the words divorce and adultery, but when you look at what it's actually saying, it's not legislating on those issues. Well, how do we manage this thing which is a real problem in our life? Right? But we want to ultimately end up managing it in the spirit of what Jesus is teaching on the Sermon on the Mount.